I still remember the anxiety of those early veterinary career days, second guessing myself, feeling like I had to have all the answers, and wondering if I was really cut out for this. If that feels familiar, you're not alone. Ready Vet Go is the mentorship program I wish I had. A 7-month journey with live mentorship, community, and real world skills to help you grow your confidence. It's perfect for early career vets and anyone making a transition into small animal practice, but anyone is welcome to join. New cohorts start in July and October, and you can get 10% off with the code SPRINKLE at readyvetgo.co. You don't have to figure it out alone.
This is my love letter to veterinary medicine because every single person who wrote a chapter, I said, imagine a future of veterinary medicine that you want to be a part of and write to that future.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. Our guest story today starts with a book and ends with a book, as a magical world enticed a 6-year-old to believe in limitless possibilities for her career with animals. Also making her what she calls a statistical anomaly, she now brings possibilities of a beautiful, diverse animal health profession. Dr. Kemba Marshall has also had a diverse career, starting with interesting stories with exotic animals, to obtaining board certification in avian medicine, to her most recent chapter, a widely published love letter to the veterinary profession, providing an A to Z guide on diversity, equity, and inclusion in veterinary medicine. In this episode, you'll hear about courage to be the only one in the room that looks like you and thrive in an accepting team bound by the desire to promote the best process for animal care. You'll also hear about how the veterinary degree is extremely flexible and how we can bring value in many settings that greatly impact animal care. Whether it's speaking or writing, Kemba engages and inspires. So let's get to the conversation with Dr. Kemba Marshall. I was thinking a lot about this, and I want to actually start with a very different question. And I've asked somebody this question before, and I loved that I did it because I got a good story out of it. I'm really curious about the origin of your name. I think it's a beautiful name. So do you mind sharing a little bit about where your name comes from?
Sure. This is going to give you more information into Kemba and the Marshall household.
Okay.
So I'm a 70s baby. And in the 70s, the thing to do if you were a young African-American couple living in the South, wanting to really have a way to celebrate the pride of your culture, is you would open a book of African names and you would just run your fingers down until you found one that you liked. And when you landed on Kemba, you would find that that is Nigerian in origin and that it means trustworthy and faithful.
That's a beautiful meaning. I love that.
Yeah,
I really like that. So thank you for sharing.
absolutely. And thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So speaking about your origins too, when did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
Young. 6, 8. So my mom's an English teacher. So every summer we did a book report, not for school, but for my mom. Like we went to the library, we had our library cards, like it was a full on book report. And so I read C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it's a great story. There's some kids, they go through the wardrobe, which is a closet. They get into the land of Narnia. There's a king. He's a lion. His name is Aslan. One of the kids does something wrong, and then it's a whole tragic turnout, like the lion gets killed by the wicked ice witch. And as a little kid, I am reading this, voraciously. And we, at the time, had German Shepherds. We're a German Shepherd family. And so at the time, they were outside because they were outside dogs back in the day. And I distinctly remember reading the book and then going outside and legit talking to the dogs. I'm reading this book. I notice you all have a government. If you need anything, paper, pens, let me know. I can bring you supplies from inside the house. And of course, my dogs are looking at me like, do you have toys? Do you have food? Then what are you doing? Like, why are you out here? But to me, like that book just was like that thing that said there is something about animals that I think I'm one of the few to know, and that I think I will be able to always hold that secret connection. And with that secret connection, for me, the ideal way to accomplish that professionally would be to become a veterinarian. And so when I told my parents I'm going to become a veterinarian, I mean, as a mom, Megan, you're like, when your kid is like somewhere between age 6 to 8, that's a lot of, oh, that's super cool. Yes, good on you. And you're like, and next week it'll be a ballerina. And then after that, it'll be a firefighter. And nope, I never wavered from that. And so it was that book and me as an early identifier that led me to where I am today.
I love that. And as I was mentioning before, I've listened to a few podcast episodes that you've been on, and I heard you at one point call yourself a statistical anomaly
Oh, yeah.
when it comes to the kind of like the earlier aspect of deciding you wanted to be a veterinarian. And so do you mind sharing a little bit about why you call yourself a
Oh,
statistical anomaly?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when you look at the profession of veterinary medicine, looking at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, we know that our profession is one of the least diverse professions in the United States. And so African Americans make up fewer than 2% of all veterinarians. And so when I was growing up, the first veterinarian I ever saw was an African American male who was vaccinating my German Shepherds because we're a German Shepherd family. And so as a child, that doesn't register as something significant. But as a child, I did register that becoming a veterinarian was very approachable and very close to me and very tangible because I literally saw my dogs getting cared for by Dr. Larry Wallace. And so when I think about all of the stars that had to align for me to be a child that had a family who, quite honestly, could afford to take their dogs to a veterinarian. And oh, by the way, that veterinarian who's around the corner from our house, our neighborhood veterinarian, was an African American male. On paper, there's no way to math that out and say that that is going to happen. And yet it happened. And here I am.
Did you ever like volunteer with that clinic or talk to that veterinarian at
Well,
all about being a vet?
I think now I have been practicing veterinary medicine for several decades. I think Dr. Wallace wrote one of my letters of recommendation. I never worked in his clinic though, because I'm super close to my dad. And so when you're young and it's the 1980s-ish, you can start working at say 13. And so my first and only job that I ever had was at the Museum of Science and History, which was on my dad's way to work. So my dad was like, yes, you can have a job, but I'm not going out of the way. Wherever I'm taking you, I better be on the way to my real job. And I was at the Museum of Science and History because they had a vivarium. So we had snakes, tarantulas, scorpions, lizards in this museum, and we would do tours and demonstrations. And so I remember as a kid walking around the museum with a scorpion in my hand, asking other kids and parents, do you want to pet the scorpion? And I remember I was also the show stopper, and we had a snake, and that snake's name was Motasap. And Motasap was a 13-foot boa constrictor. And I had been telling my mom, you got to come to the show. You got to come to the show. I'm in the show. And, my mom, working mom, she's like, so I'm at work. I don't have time to come see you. But once it was a weekend or something, and my mom's like, okay, I'm coming to the show. My mom's sitting in the back, and I didn't tell her what Motosap and I did together. I just said, I'm in the show. And so my job was to wrap him around my ankle. I wrapped him around one leg, around my waist, and then at the end, his head sat on my shoulder. And I would walk out at the end, and I'm like, this is Motasap. He's very nice. If you use the 2-finger touch rule, you can touch him. And so the day that my mom actually comes to the show, this is the grand finale. And me and Motasap, we are doing our thing. And I look out and I'm like, my mother is sleeping. This is my moment, and my mother is asleep. Megan, my mom had passed out. She
Oh
had
no.
no idea what I was gonna do, and she said to me later, "You walked out and all I saw was a snake wrapped around your body." She's like, "I'm out. Boop. I'm out. No, done. Done." Like smelling salts and everything, passed out during the show.
Oh no. Well, this also may actually get into the question because I had no idea how you started getting into like exotics and
Yeah.
birds. So, is this kind of what got your interest into
Yes.
other types of
Yeah,
animals?
yeah, 100%. I mean, the start of my veterinary career was in exotics, and then I coupled that with my love of travel. I think one of the greatest gifts that my parents ever gave me is that since I was itty bitty, like we've always been on a plane, going to see something we've never seen before. And so I love to travel. And when I was in vet school, I thought, you know what? If I were to focus on exotics and specifically tropical parrots for work, I would have to be flown to tropical locations to administer care to these tropical parrots. And so I tracked mixed in vet school, but I knew early on I was going to do avian and exotic medicine in vet school because I needed someone to pay for my travel.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Yes. Uh, and so how did that work out?
So
Did you get travel?
So I did a private practice internship, and then I did my residency in avian medicine and surgery at the University of Tennessee. And so after doing my residency, I was in private practice for a while and then joined PetSmart, one of the largest pet retailers in North America. And initially, I joined as a technical services veterinarian, specifically working with birds. And during the interview, I asked them if they were going to provide me a passport because one of my duties was to go to breeder sites and work through a quality assurance manual and audit to make sure that the breeders were upholding PetSmart quality assurance standards. And they were like, "Passport." And they were like, what do you need the passport for? And I was like, "Oh, well, the breeders, I'm sure, are on these tropical islands. So I'll be going there." And they were like, "Oh, yeah. So the breeders are in Dallas, Texas, kind of outside of Dallas. So you don't need a passport for that." And I was like, "Oh, okay, off I go." Now, I will say I still needed the passport because we had stores both in the United States and in Canada. It's just that I didn't need the passport for what I thought I needed it for.
Canada is a little less
A little
tropical.
less tropical. Yeah, and I did a lot of audits in the fall and the winter. So yeah, 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 yeah.
Of course, that would be the time they send you to Canada. Oh, well, I happen to know you have been able to travel since then, but maybe we'll get to that. But yes, all good plans and all of that. But I did hear you once say that when you were going to PetSmart,
Mhm.
this felt like a dream job for you. So what about this did you feel like was like you had made it?
So a couple of things. Prior to that, I did not have any idea that corporations like a PetSmart, like a Petco, hired veterinarians. And so just the thought that there were veterinarians solely focused on the quality of pets, and not every living thing sold. So feeder crickets, feeder fish, mealworms. I mean, you name it. There are veterinarians focused on the quality of those living animals. So that to me was mind boggling in a very, very positive way because sometimes what we hear in the news about breeders and retailers does not always hold them in a positive light. And so that was one of the first times that I was aware that literally anywhere that there are living animals, veterinarians are there somewhere. Most often we're in the background, right? Because we're very focused on animals and we're not here to, be the one that has the the microphone and during the interviews, but that to me was very rewarding and made me feel extremely proud of the profession. And then the other thing that I would say is PetSmart to me had a really good approach to doing quality assurance. So as a veterinary team, we reported to the merchandisers who made those purchase orders. And if we had a breeder fail an audit, we as the veterinary team had the ability to turn trucks around and say, we refuse shipments because you're not in keeping with our audit standards. And I thought that that was very refreshing because you and I have both seen times where there is an audit and you have a technical service team or a team of subject matter experts, but that audit goes into file 13 and oh, no one found it and oh, no one ever looked at it. But I mean, these audits were taken very seriously, not only by the corporation, but also by the breeder, by the breeding community, I should say. And so when I say it was a dream job, it was a job that I had never expected, number one, to exist, number two, that I would be in, and number three, it really helped me understand the impact of things like policies and procedures. Because when I was leaving clinical medicine, I had peers, I had managers who said, oh, you're not going to be a real vet anymore because you're not going to see patients. And that's hurtful. I mean, to have peers say, oh, you're not a real vet, as if the veterinary degree that hangs on the wall, as if the internship, the residency were all for naught. But for me, when I joined PetSmart, just to help you understand the scale, they were selling 30,000 parakeets a year, parakeets. And so I knew if I could impact the life of 30,000 parakeets in 1 year, there's no way that as a private practitioner, even boarded in avian medicine, that I was going to see 30,000 parakeet come through my clinic doors. So I was then able to say, aha, I can use policies and procedures, and I may not physically touch these animals, but these animals will be impacted by me on a far greater scale than any animal that I could see during a clinical appointment.
Oh, yeah, definitely exponentially impact. And you, by seeing that behind the scenes aspect of things, that's a unique perspective that you can even give back to other veterinarians when they're advising
Yes.
clients who say, I would love to get a bird. I don't know where to start, or I've heard these horror stories. Where do I start? And you're able to know what to look for or where to point
Yeah.
them. And so you're able to kind of give that back to the veterinary community too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I always tell people, anywhere that you see animals, always know that veterinarians are somewhere. They have to be, and I would tell people all the time, it wasn't just the live animals that we had influence over. I mean, we looked at toys, treats, sweaters, hats, goggles, everything that you see in that store. Veterinarians have the ability to say, I have concerns about this. This is a great product. We need to tweak this product before it's going to be safe to be put on the shelves. So PetSmart really opened my eyes to a different definition of impact, specifically through policies and procedures. Yeah.
It's so funny. I just had a conversation a little earlier today about that. Wherever animals are impacted, a veterinarian needs to be there. And
Yeah.
so it is good to hear when other people agree and are employing those veterinarians in those very settings, because you're right. It's good to know that the relationship with us, the pet parent, we can impact them in all aspects of where they go to take care of their pet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or any animal.
And retailers, merchandisers are looking for that opinion. So if we said, for example, I will say that when you look at the habitats that are inside of a Petco or a PetSmart, veterinarians are looking at those habitats. It's not just a glass box with some bedding where chinchillas are running around or guinea pigs are running around. We're looking at heating, we're looking at lighting, we're looking at the cleaning, the disinfectant cleaning products that are used. Like it's really a holistic evaluation of everything that's going on in the store. And I will hold out for you that, yes, there are times when we see some breeders who do some things that are really reprehensible. And those are the things that are going to be in the news. But when you think about breeders who are supplying animals for Petco and PetSmart, these are some of the best run, well maintained facilities. Of course, the general public won't ever be able to see them because it's not safe, for the animals. It's not safe for the breeders. But I do want people who say all breeders are terrible and all breeders are evil to pause and say, there are breeders in the United States, in Canada, that if I walked you through those facilities, you would say, they do a better job than I do taking care of my own pets in my own home.
I feel like everybody just feels really good right now about that because again, that is definitely a question right now. So this was your dream
Mhm,
job. Things can change. So what happened that led you to something very different?
mhm.
Where I also heard you talk about you didn't have any of the qualifications for the job, or at least you initially it would look like.
Yeah.
So what led you to the next step?
Yeah. So PetSmart's headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona. And I am born and raised from Jacksonville, Florida, and just began thinking, as my parents get older, I want to be a little bit closer to them because it became not challenging, but it was a bit of an ordeal. Like it's a full travel day to get from Phoenix to Jacksonville, Florida. And, if there was ever an emergency, like I could not quickly get home. So on the personal side, I was thinking about those things. Professionally, what I fell in love with was my ability to impact and influence inside a corporate setting. So, talking to the general counsel, if we had legal concerns, talking to merchandisers, if we were talking about what products are going to come into the store, talking to breeders, like I really felt like I was impacting and influencing a lot of different portions of the business. And some things happened where there was a leadership change and my ability to have that impact and that influence was there no longer. And I remember specifically talking about like my, what I would call an individual development plan, where you kind of look, at, maybe a 1 to 3 year outlook and say, these are the skills that I think I'm good at. How do I get better at these? These are the skills that I really could improve. What opportunities do I have to get better at those? And oh, by the way, what is my next step? So many times as a subject matter expert, you're brought in pretty high, but when you're asking for the next step, a lot of times there is no next step. What I heard all the time is, you're a veterinarian. We hired you as a veterinarian. What more could you ask for? And I would always say, I cannot sit in this same desk, this same role, do this same job for 30 years. There has to be something more than I could do. And what I found was at PetSmart, I had done all of the things that I was going to be able to do there. And actually, it was talking to one of the best managers that I've ever had and doing my individual development plan. And my manager said to me, when I look at your resume, what I don't see is the research and development. So at PetSmart, I was able to look at products and say, this is what I think about products. Should they come into the store? Yes, no. But that product development piece, where we have a blank piece of paper and then eventually there is a product, I didn't have that experience. And so when Land O'Lakes Purina Animal Nutrition Center said that they were hiring a technical services veterinarian that happened to be based in Missouri, which is a little bit closer to Florida, I said, I gotta go see what this is. So interestingly enough, I will tell you that Land O'Lakes Purina and Nestle Purina share the same name, last name, but they're two completely different companies. So Nestle Purina, think dog, cat, Petco, PetSmart, Chewy. Land O'Lakes Purina, think Tractor Supply Company, catfish, poultry, sheep, goats, pigs, beef cattle, dairy cattle. So when I initially applied for that position, I thought that I was going to be working on the dog and cat Nestle side.
Oh,
And when I went for the in-person interview, I saw that we were literally turning onto a large animal research farm. And I looked at the outfit that I was wearing, which was not fit to go walk in any, beef feedlot. And I said, huh, I wonder how I'm going to save this interview. Because literally, the only thing that I could remember from my large animal time in vet school was that pigs have a gestation period of 114 days. That was all I had. I had 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 days. So we're on the farm. I'm meeting all of it's about a 2,000 acre farm. And so everything is arranged by units. So the beef cattle are to themselves, the dairy cattle are to themselves, swine, equine, goats, sheep, everything. And so during the interview, I am talking to someone and they are doing the poultry research. And they are explaining that when they do poultry research, because they are taking blood samples to do things like monitor calcium levels, the studies have to be terminal. And I said, why don't you just use a jugular vein and pull the samples that way? And the researcher looked at me and he said, birds have a jugular vein? I said, they have two. He said, when can you start? Yes. Yes. Once again, birds took me right over the
but
top. Yes.
luckily they were working on poultry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man, but what a difference. Isn't that amazing? Like, this occurs to me too, being in industry sometimes, that things will come up that seem so straightforward to us, and it's like revolutionary, and it is like a burst of like confidence. That's like, oh, I do have something to contribute.
100%. Because think about that. This researcher is formulating a diet because what they want to do is they want to increase the amount of calcium available to an egg laying backyard poultry hen. That researcher is a subject matter expert in how to formulate diets. That researcher is not a subject matter expert in the anatomy of said bird that they're feeding because they're nutritionists, they're not veterinarians. And so that's just a perfect way to highlight how subject matter experts can work so closely together without competition. I was never going to
Man.
say to him, hey, last night I worked up this diet. What do you think about this in terms of protein concentration, fat concentration? I was never going to say that to him. And he was never going to say to me, hey, instead of using a 22 gauge needle, what do you think about using a 25 gauge needle to bleed a bird? Never going to say that to me. But every single day when we met, he knew I was helping him make sure that the diet that he was formulating was going to be tested appropriately. And I knew that he knew that me being there made it such that we were going to have a more robust test and we could have more confidence in that product that then would wind up on the shelf. And I remembered my manager from PetSmart who said to me, when you do an individual development plan, it is for your individual development. Whether or not you stay with this company or go on to work for another company, it's your development plan.
Mm. Well, I mean, again, it goes back to show the importance of diversity and different perspectives in when you're working through a challenge, a problem, whatever you want to call it. But I want to go back to you because I think this was really important to call it, and I have some questions about it. Before you officially agreed to this job, also probably someone, I think this was nice to say up front, was that there's going to be no one who looks like you when you come into this role.
Yeah.
And if you're not okay with that, then you may not want to agree because that's just the way it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So when that person said that, what was the thought going through your mind? And what was your experience going into more food animal type of
Yeah.
environments where Man, you talked about 2%. It's probably even smaller if you just, isolate those types of animals. So,
Yeah.
yes, please share more about that.
Yeah. So because the facility is located in Gray Summit, Missouri, it was not a surprise to me that the diversity in Gray Summit, Missouri is probably best defined as male versus female. So it wasn't a surprise to me, but it was a surprise that I would have a hiring manager who was so attuned that that may be an issue, that they wanted me to know that going in. And so that I thought was just an applause for when you have hiring managers that are not just thinking about can you do the jobs and duties as listed, but what is your experience here going to be like? There's no sense in bringing a candidate in, having them come, and you not have real upfront, transparent conversations like that. Because had that been an issue to me, they had flown me down not once, but twice for interviews. I've had a full day where I'm meeting with the researchers. I'm looking at their ongoing projects and to invest all that time and energy. And what if I had said, I'm only going to stay here for 30 days? So when that hiring manager was like, I want to make sure not only that you understand what we're asking you to do work wise, but also what we're asking you to do personally, that made me want to come even more because that manager was thinking about what I call the 5 p.m. problem. Because so often when you're somewhere and you have moved and it's not your hometown, and you can't say to someone, oh, this is so and so that I went to high school with. So, of course, I'm going to go do dinner with them. Of course, I'm going to hang out with them on the weekends. It can be very isolating. But that same hiring manager who, when I said, yes, I will accept the job, took a very vested interest in me having something to do in the evenings, that 5 p.m. problem. So she invited me to her home where she made me dinner, and her husband had prepared a list of all of the things that I should see in the city. And she would say to me, hey, I don't know if you're interested, but here's an art gallery exhibit. Here's something happening at the museum that you might be interested in. So she was very vested in making sure that my experience was one where I could find things that would be meaningful for me outside of work. And yes, being on a large animal research farm, I was the only African American female to have ever worked there. And remember when I said the company's last name is Purina and it's more than 100 years old. But outside of that, I will also say people who are concerned about animal health very quickly get to, if you have the ability to help me, that's all that matters. So the individuals who were managing the beef unit, the dairy unit, the swine unit, they were like, do you have scrubs and boots? And can you tell me what's going on? Welcome, come in. Let me tell you everything. Right. And it was a great learning experience. I got to use all of the large animal parts of my brain that when I was tracking mixed animal in school, I hadn't used for quite some time. I learned so much. And because it's a research farm, they really prioritize getting to the root cause of any illness, any disease, which meant that we necropsied better than 95% of every animal that ever died on that farm. And if you want to relearn anatomy and physiology, do necropsies. And I mean, we were able to do some really significant things. So, for example, we were able to isolate certain bacteria that would be impacting our swine when they were in the farrowing house. And because it's such a large scientific center, we were able to develop autogenous vaccines where we could see that death rate reduced because of the vaccines that we developed as a veterinary team. So again, when you're thinking about impact, you don't just say, oh, it's a nutrition company and all I'm going to do is do vaccines and think about dewormers. You go in and you say, what are all of the animal health problems that you're having? as a veterinarian, what can I do to bring value to that? And again, it was such a symbiotic marriage when you go to anyone who's a producer and say that your death rate or your loss rate is reduced because of those necropsies that we did. You bet every time I said, "Hey, I have a question. Let me come over and let me see how things are doing." They're like, "Please come because we know that you're going to be able to help us." So it was a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. And I still have a lot of good friends at that farm.
I'm glad you had such good experiences in these, but as life happens, there are moments where there's time to reflect and kind of see if there's something that else, because you seem to be a very growth minded person,
Mhm,
right? It's like, I can't sit here and do the same thing over and over and over again. You have that interest to continually learn and make impact in different
mhm,
ways. And so I think it was around pandemic time where you stopped and thought about a few things. So what was kind of that pivot moment for you when it was time to maybe think about doing something a little bit different?
mhm. So during the pandemic, George Floyd gets murdered. And at that time, everyone is at home, sequestered, isolated. So we're all watching the same thing, but having very personal, very individualized reactions to what we're seeing. So there's George Floyd, there's Ahmaud Arbery, there's Breonna Taylor, and just there's a lot of things going on, and we're seeing it, but you don't have the ability to go to work and talk about this in a break room. You're just wherever you are having this individual experience. And a lot of my colleagues were reaching out, texting me, having questions. And I remember one of my very, very, very good friends and my classmate, Dr. Mia Carey, I said to her, "Why are people asking me questions? I have nothing to say because just like other people are processing, I'm processing. I have nothing to say. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening." And Mia said to me, "But what if you did have something to say? Is that possible?" I was like, maybe that is possible. And so she really just interrupted that whole loop that I was on mentally. And then that question of if I were going to say something, what would I say? What would that be? Is what led me to my next chapter.
I was going to ask how you met Mia. So you said you were
Yes, vet
classmates?
school classmates.
Okay.
Yeah.
You really have known each other
A
for a long time.
long time.
How
Yes. Yes.
and you kept in touch that
Oh,
long
I mean, well, my
too?
whole class is very, very, I mean, we
Cool.
vacation together, we do reunion trips, we have group text threads. So I'm close with my entire class, but Mia and I have just been very connected for a very long time. And, like anything, we work on maintaining that connection.
Yeah. Well, and you do. You're doing lots of things together and offering different things together. So when Mia, it sounds like she even maybe presented a little like a challenge, which usually it's the people who know us that well that can do
Right?
that.
Isn't it true?
Um,
Yes.
it is. So she kind of gives you maybe a different way of looking at it and a smidge of a challenge. Well, how do you decide what to do next? Because I'm sure it's intimidating too, because
Yeah, it's
this is
uncharted.
vulnerable.
It's
This is different.
right,
Yeah.
right. And there's no thing that's the way to do it, right? This is not a spay or neuter where I look and there's certain steps and this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how are you responding to political things, societal challenges, societal questions, and there's no manual for that. And while that was happening, as things often do, my time at Land O'Lakes Purina had also come to an end. And so now, not only am I thinking, what am I thinking about in this pandemic era where we're all at home, we're all spending a lot of time thinking, and we're all answering questions like, if I'm not sure how much more time I have to live because there's a pandemic going on and I don't know if I'm going to live through this, what are the things that I can do that are most impactful? And as my time at Land O'Lakes was ending, that door was closing. The door that opened was that Wiley Publishing reached out and said, "Would you consider writing a book? Because we want to have a book about diversity, equity, and inclusion in veterinary medicine." And then from that question that Mia asked, that reframing, like, what if you did have something to say? I was really able to utilize that time during COVID and really start thinking more deeply about, specifically in veterinary medicine, where I feel like I have impact and influence. What would I say? What would I do? And then that project came to life.
And to expound on something that you said, that like during the pandemic, you were having an individual experience, and that the reason I pull this out, because I think this was one reason that you decided to go about building this book, was that this is a topic where it's an individual experience type of a situation, and the more perspectives, coming back to that can contribute. I think that you were seeing that this could really put more meaning behind what this really means for the profession
Exactly.
and beyond. So how did you go about forming the, I guess, Avengers of the book,
Yeah.
all the people that were going to contribute?
Yeah. Well, I knew instantly that I could not write a book about diversity, equity, inclusion on my own, because I'm one person with one lived experience. And if I was the only one who wrote it, that wasn't going to be diverse or equitable or inclusive. So then I thought, who are the people that I know who per chapter could bring something that's tangible, that they say, this is the way that I did it. And so I knew that I wanted people who had done things inside and outside of veterinary medicine. And I knew that when I thought about the chapters, right, the chapters are an A to Z guide, because so often veterinarians and veterinary technicians and veterinary caregivers, we want to know, even if I don't know, here's the way to do it, I want to know, here's one way to do it. So I wanted to offer by chapter, here's one way to do it. And I looked at people who could bring that to life for me. So for example, the book starts with the chapter Access to Care. And so I reached out to Dr. Michael Blackwell, who had been my dean when I was at the University of Tennessee, because he's doing amazing work with a program now, which is called Align Care, which answers the question, how do we make it so that individuals that fall below the poverty line and who are living with their pets, who are their bonded family members, can still access care? And then I said I wanted people who were outside of veterinary medicine. So the justice chapter was written by an attorney, and this is attorney Iwan Brown. And I wanted him to talk to me about justice and talk to our profession about justice in a way that a non-veterinarian would think about it. And then there's a values chapter, and the values chapter is written by Dr. James Pritchett. Dr. James Pritchett is on faculty at the University of Colorado and happens to be an agricultural economist. And I wanted his perspective, not only as an economist, when you think about values and numbers, but also as an academic leader who's leading an academic program where groups of students are coming through. So I really sat and thought about what are the chapters that I would want represented and who are the individuals who I could speak to that. And of course, I can't end this until I say that for the kindness chapter, Dr. Mia Carey wrote that chapter, because Mia is absolutely one of the kindest people that I know. And I wanted to challenge myself to have so many different topics by chapter that everyone, no matter where you are in veterinary medicine, if you're a pet owner, if you're an animal owner, if you're a producer, you can find something in this book that you learn from, because each chapter starts with the what. So we define the topic or the term. Then we do the so what. In veterinary medicine, how or why is this relevant? And then every chapter ends with the now what. Practically, what can we offer you that tomorrow you can put in place? Because I wanted it to be a book that gets used. I want it to be one of those books that you highlighted and the pages are kind of beat up because you're underlining things and you're actually using this as a workbook.
I love that. And so a couple questions. Are you okay on time if I go? I can only imagine being able to get the wisdom of so many different people for this book. What are some of the things from hearing these amazing individuals contribute to these topics, is there anything that is just top of mind, or things that either really impressed you, stood out, maybe surprised you? Any particular story or thing that kind of came out of this book that was especially meaningful for you?
Yeah, I think the thing is, each person who wrote a chapter, something happened to them in their life, and they decide to do something about it. So for the First Nation chapter, Dr. Evelyn Galvin, who's on faculty at Penn, is also the founder of the Native American Veterinary Association. Because when she was little and growing up, she didn't have someone who could connect her to veterinary medicine until she was working with a professor. And so the Native American Veterinary Association is designed to be that kind of North Star for those little kids who are like, veterinary medicine is what I want to do. And so I'll give you another one, and that is Dr. India Woods wrote the representation chapter. And the representation chapter she wrote because when she was a student at Auburn, she realized that they didn't have an existing pipeline program. So she stayed on after she graduates from vet school to be the creator of their pipeline program, so that students who are young, these students are middle schoolers, high schoolers, can get connected to Auburn, have some experiences where they're on campus, and then be a way to start that pipeline. So everyone that I asked to write a chapter has done something positively to impact the profession.
This does not sound like your ordinary textbook. This
Right.
sounds very storytelling, like very personal, which I'm just so excited to read it. How do you foresee, this is great for Will that's currently in the profession. How do you foresee this helping, maybe, like you said, like that was a great example of someone who's trying to start younger,
Mhm.
uh, especially because just like you and myself included, we were early identifiers.
Yep.
A very large percent of people coming into animal health know it at a young age.
Mhm.
So does this book offer an opportunity to help reach the younger generation to get them into our animal health care community?
Yeah, that's the whole goal. I tell people, like, this is my love letter to veterinary medicine, because every single
Mm.
person who wrote a chapter, I said, imagine a future of veterinary medicine that you want to be a part of, and write to that future. So I want young people who are interested in veterinary medicine to pick this book up and say, that's someone that I can contact. Dr. Rustin Moore, Sandra Knoblaw, and Sue Dawkins at the Ohio State University wrote the Belonging chapter, because the Ohio State University College of Veterinary Medicine is doing amazing work around improving the academic environment for students. So if I had a student who said, I don't know where to start, if they get to chapter number 2 and they say, wait, what if I reach out to the Ohio State University to ask them about their pipeline program? There's something for the future that that young person could grab onto, you know? And then also I have veterinary technicians. So Harold Davis and Teresa Cosper wrote a chapter for me on unconscious bias. So if I have a young person who doesn't really understand what the term unconscious bias is, or says, I don't understand how unconscious bias has anything to do with veterinary medicine, reading that chapter then gives them not only the lived experiences of a group of individuals, but also people that they can reach out to. So now in this, socially media connected world that we all live in, everyone's a LinkedIn message away, right? So it's a way that people not only have one particular framework that they may choose to follow, but also a real person who has a real lived experience, who's interested in furthering the profession that they can reach out to.
Oh, I love this. Well, thank you. I am glad to be able to share the word about this, because I'm very excited by it. Honestly, I also want to get the book so I can find all these people to reach out to and interview on the podcast too.
Exactly.
So
Please
I may
do.
need your help.
Yes. I'm glad to do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And before we leave, I always love to ask the question, what is something that you are very grateful for right now?
Oh my gosh. We're alive and we chose this profession. How many people in the world can say that they love what they do? Not many. And we love it. Yes, there are days that you're like, oh, I'm going to go to the bathroom. Yes, there are days that you may need to take a walk outside because like something just happened. But I am so grateful that we do this and that this profession has me meet people like you, right? And that we're able to talk to things that are good and we're making a difference. And we know that the profession is better because of us. So I'm really, really grateful for the profession, but specifically for the connection that the profession brings to me on a daily basis.
I hope you enjoyed this fascinating veterinary story. We can make an impact in so many places. If you liked this episode, I highly recommend checking out the episode with Latona Craig, the Chief DEI Officer of the ABMA, and the episode with Stardust Hutcherson, a veterinary student who also led Auburn's pipeline program. Check out the show notes for lots of resources. Please make sure you are subscribed on your podcast app, subscribe on the YouTube channel, and follow me on LinkedIn, where I hang out the most. You can contact me on LinkedIn, on the website at vetlifereimagined.com. And to send me a text message, find the link at the top of the show notes below that says, send us a text message. I want to thank our longtime sponsors, Fire Consulting and Will Hughes, who support the podcast over on our hosting platform, Buzzsprout. You can support the podcast too. Just check out the show notes for a link. And I hope to see you next time on Vet Life Reimagined.